These are 4 of the pumps that we looked at. We're going to concentrate on the Acacia, which is probably the least accurate of the 4 pumps. We'll come back to these others later. These are the floor pump readings. That is, for instance, at 100 psi, we pump it up to 100, measure it with our Jaco calibrated gauge, let some air out, pump it again, etc. This is the range that we got for 4 readings. This is the mean. This is the maximum error, that is below the mean, 7 below 110, or the maximum positive error, that is, we could have 110 plus 10 psi, or 120. To make this a little bit more meaningful, let's copy this area and graph it, and we can see it a little bit easier. So we'll highlight. We only want to look at this portion. Control C, call up a new blank worksheet, and let's hit Control V, and we're going to look at these areas. Now we don't really need the range. We already have the mean and the maximum error around the mean, and it's that portion we want to graph. So let's just, for our purposes, get rid of this particular column. So we go down to delete, entire column, OK, and it's this that we want to graph. To graph it, let's highlight it. Let's go to Insert, for our charts, Scatter. If we pick the 4th one, we'll actually get more lines showing. It'll make it a little bit easier for us. Let's enlarge that. Now we're going to go to Add. We're going to add axis titles. We're going to add tread line. Click the arrow next to it. More options. Let's try, here we go. And let's also display the equation. Close this. Now I'd really like to get a graph showing not in 20 intervals, but in 10. And the way you can do this is by highlighting the X and Y axis. There we go. Right click, format axis, and let's put in 10. Okay. Now let's do the same. See if we can do the same over here. There we go. Format axis, put in 10. And now we have a graph that'll show us in intervals of 10. We'll clean this up. We'll label the axis and the chart title, etc. in just a minute. In order to display the error, and then we'll clean up the chart and label everything. Let's click the chart. Let's go to error bar. More options. Now we want the vertical, not the horizontal. Let's click on one of the vertical bars over here. Here we get the vertical. We'll go to Custom, Specify. Now the values for the positive error, let's backspace to erase that. The positive error are these values. The negative error, backspace, are these values. That is the maximum error that can occur. And then we'll hit OK. All right, now it's time to label the chart. This is the Acacia, calibration curve, We don't need any of this, so we'll just delete that. The the y-axis is our true value for the Jaco tire gauge. Our x-axis is our floor pump reading. And to make this a little easier to visualize, let's go ahead and make this bold. There we go. All right, let's look at this calibration curve and get some idea of what we mean. Remember that the Jaco is a calibrated gauge giving us the actual pressure in the tire. And if we want a 70 psi, go over here, we need to pump to just 65 in order to get 70 psi. If we want to pump to 80, we need to psi. We need to have that floor gauge only read 75, and we'll have a true reading of 80 psi. What does this error mean? Should we decide that we're going to pump our tire to 100 psi according to the floor pump, we may have a reading as low as 103 or up to 120. Well, if my tire ideal pressure as labeled on the tire is 90 to 110 and I pump it to 100, I may have a true pressure of 120, which exceeds the maximum, and it's going to cause me to flat out when I'm out in the road. So this kind of error really tells me, well, pump seems to be all right down here, but in the area that I use the most often, the error is very large, and I'm going to run into problems. I probably don't want to use this pump. So what we've learned is how we can draw a calibration curve and then look at the error also and say, well, it looks all right down here, but in the area I want to work with, I don't think I want to use this pump. When we look at the other three pumps, the restored Wiggle, Jaco 3, which is new, the 10-year-old Specialized. For the restored pump, the values for the mean are right on. Correlation curves are excellent. Same with the Jaco 3. And the value we pump to on the dial in the pump can be used as the tire pressure. We get a little bit more variation we can see of the mean from the actual tire pressure. When we look here with our Specialized, to some this may be fine and can use this pump. To others who want to be a little bit closer, you may want to replace this or go ahead and restore the Specialized pump to give you a little better values.